But when I came back, it was like, age doesn't matter. Like, people can say what they want. It does not matter. I just am. I am. It doesn't matter my age. If I am capable, if I have the ability, I can do this. And honest to goodness, it was so empowering. And even now, all these years later, I still feel it when I talk about it. Nobody can take that feeling away from you. That's the beauty of it all.
Today's conversation is a really inspiring one. I'm joined by Sheila Nollert, who you might know from Instagram as Grandma Moves. This is a conversation about aging, self-trust, and most importantly, what happens when you stop letting other people's expectations decide what's possible for you. At 65, Sheila took herself off into the Canadian wilderness on a solo backcountry canoe trip, paddling lake to lake, carrying everything she needed, completely alone, with no phone signal and no quick exit. But this isn't another story about an extreme adventurer. Sheila would never describe herself in that way. What's more interesting is the run-up to that decision, to do something she hadn't even imagined was something she'd try. We talk about what sparked the idea, the doubts, and the ageist comments that tried to shut it down, and what she learned about herself when she was there. We also talk about the message of anti-ageism, in the way Sheila chooses to share it, not in a loud or combative way, but in a much quieter and I feel more powerful one. The kind that starts with noticing the way we talk to ourselves, the assumptions we absorb, and the moments where we unknowingly start folding our wings, as Sheila describes it. This episode is about trusting yourself to keep saying yes to life. Whatever that looks like for you, I think you're going to really enjoy it. Welcome, Sheila. It's great to have you on the Make Movement Matter podcast. And I know that you've been active since your 20s, but it was the Instagram account that you have been posting to, which is at grandma_moves, that caught my eye. And that came a lot later. So what made you start posting on Instagram?
Well, to be honest, it was COVID, but I mean, I have a passion for fitness and movement and have, as you know, since my 20s. And so it just became a natural progression. And the opportunity was there because we were all sequestered at home for such a long time. And it just was the right thing. It grew so naturally for me. And it was an opportunity that I'm glad I grasped at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you did too, because some of the messages are absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that you talk about, you've talked about to me, and that is through a lot of your messages, is about ageism. And we're going to talk a bit more about that towards the end of the podcast. But I'd love to know when you first became aware of ageism in general, not just in society, but also in perhaps your own self-talk.
Well, I think the first time it really became noticeable was when I was in a crowded area and someone was trying to move through the crowd quickly, and they just came up to me and where I was standing, and they went, like, "Look, old lady, get out of the way." And I was just like, my mouth fell open, like, what? Like, and I realized they did that because they thought that I was just an old person in the way. Like, I really felt that. It just seemed very obvious. And I guess once you start noticing things like that, the internal messages start. Like, yeah, I really am aging and things are changing. And though I feel the same, society doesn't feel the same about me. So I feel maybe I got to look at myself a little different. Like, all these thoughts that are perpetuated by what you feel within society, and all these little messages, if you internalize them, they build up. and they become your reality if you let them.
That's so true. I can really understand that. My mum recently had a situation where she'd gone in for an appointment about her shoulder because she broke her elbow when she fell in the summer. And the consultant came in the room, didn't introduce himself, didn't use her name, and she just felt like she was not seen at all. And she really put it down to the fact that she was, in inverted commas, an old lady in there about something that was wrong. And she came away really angry because, you know, she was just being seen as another number. Now, we can talk about the sort of stresses on healthcare systems and so on, but it was how it made her feel and what she was left with that she was so annoyed about. And you even just said in there in your wording, you know, just an older lady. And obviously that's not how you feel, but that's, you know, just the just is it's all wrong, isn't it? Because, you know, in certain nations, I know particularly in the Far East, the elderly are seen as wise people that we must learn from because they've had so much life experience. How different would it be if that was the world over?
Certainly it would be if we were considered a resource of information. We have experience. We know what can happen. Sure, the world has changed, but I mean, there's basic stuff that we can help with. We can have a place. And society sometimes forgets that. And it's just, you know, you talked about the doctor, and that's such a big place because regardless of how we are treated there, and, you know, sometimes you can go to doctor. The doctor's very friendly. Maybe that's been your doctor for years, and they just look at you and go, well, what do you expect? Like you're 65 or you're 75. Like what did you expect? And they just kind of like go home, you know, and then the next time you have an issue, you don't go to the doctor because you don't want to be ignored, you know, like waste their time. And so you might, all these little things might build up and you just find yourself backing into a corner, backing away from society, withdrawing.
Yeah, which is all wrong. Absolutely. Well, there's so much we can talk about on this, and we will talk more later on. What I want to do is talk about something that you did because you wanted to prove to yourself and probably others around you that aging doesn't need to be a barrier. We're all aging every day, from the minute we are born until the minute we die. Aging is the process that we are all going through, and whichever stage of it is to be celebrated, as we both agree. So you're now 68, but when you were 65, you chose to take a trip into the wilderness in Canada, which is where you live, to do a solo canoe expedition. Now, people listening will probably say, what? That sounds like madness. And they probably could never, you know, put themselves there because it's probably so different to a lot of people's reality. But having chatted to you before, what I love is the road into that, because that's where I could see in our conversation that transformation from everyday you and me deciding to do something. So tell me, you told me about a moment when you were out there and you first saw another woman heading into the wilderness on her own. So take us back to that and tell us what kind of that sparked in you.
Well, we camp my husband and I camp at the same campground every September, and it's right on a lake, and it's a provincial park. So it's surrounded by wilderness. And this remote little campground is a beautiful spot. A lot of people go on canoe trips, and a lot of times you'll see men going out. They've got their canoes and their packs, and away they go, and they're gone for a week or 10 days, few days, whatever. But one day I saw a woman go out by herself, and I was watching her and I thought, wow, like that's really something. I thought, like, can you imagine doing that and how brave you have to be? And it just like, it was a wow moment. And then I thought about it a bit, but I didn't really think about committing to doing it myself. And then the next year we went back the following September, and I saw another woman, and I just thought, I think I could do this. And I thought about it more, and the more I thought about it, I wanted to see what was beyond the trees surrounding the lake, and to carry my canoe and gear through the forest from one lake to the other, and to actually camp out there. And when I thought about it, I did get this spark inside, and it was like, can you imagine? And because I work out consistently, I wasn't too worried about the physical side, but it was the psychological. Because when you're out there in a tent in the forest in the middle of nowhere, and there's bears and coyotes and wolves, and even if it's a mouse walking around, it sounds like an elephant in the middle of the night. And just there was that. It kind of took my breath away to think about actually doing something like that. But other women were doing it. And yes, they were younger, but I felt I could physically do it. But even so, the following year we were up there, and I had a problem. There was a man stalking me in the campground. And even though my husband was there, this occurred, and it made me feel vulnerable. And I went home from the campground, and I said to my daughter, you know what, this trip is off the table. I can't possibly do it when, I'm so vulnerable out there. And she said to me, I just felt like a spark went out in you, like the way I had said it to her. And I thought, you know what, that's true. And so I resolved to, get back on track and not give this guy my power. And, just I got back on track. But so it was five years before I finally did it. And I started meditating so that I could deal with the nighttime, because that would be the scary part. And if it takes you a couple of days to get in, like I was gone 4 days, so you can't just paddle across the lake and be home. You have to go out the same way you came in. So you're there. And so finally I got to doing it. So that's basically it. It was a long process, but that just made doing it even more empowering.
And so tell me what a typical day of those 4 days looked like, so that we can imagine the sort of physical side, and then we'll talk about how you felt. Just because a lot of people have no idea what this kind of expedition means. I certainly didn't when we were talking before. And so, yeah, a description would be useful.
Sure. And, even people that do know what's involved think that you have all this spare time to just, think about life. But the reality of it is, if you're out there, the first thing you do in the morning is you have to process the lake water, because you can't just drink out of the lake. So that's like a 20-minute process. You use various forms of purification, and then you're heating up water, but you're not just plugging in an electric kettle. You're starting a little propane miniature stove with your processed water, and everything takes so much longer. Plus, you have to go into the forest to get your bear canister, and that's a canister that stores your food and any garbage you have, because you don't want that in your tent because it invites bears. So every step takes so much longer. And then you have to, roll up your sleeping bag and get the air out of your, yes, I had a pillow, air out of my pillow and the little air mattress. And you have to pack all this stuff up, and it has to be very tight to fit in your backpack. And so that takes about 45 minutes. And then you load your canoe, you check your map so you know where you're going. You get your canoe in the water and you get in there and you paddle till you find where the next portage is. And the portage is marked with a little yellow sign that has a picture of someone carrying a canoe. And so you know where the portage is once you find it. So then you get up to shore, and sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes you can't get to the shore. Sometimes you have to take your shoes and socks off because it's too shallow, and you have to pull the canoe to the shore. And then you take your packs out, and so you have a big, heavy backpack. You've got a smaller backpack that might have your rain gear in it and things that you need right away, like your phone, because I used it to take video and pictures. I didn't have cell service out there. And that kind of thing. And then you've got your tent to carry, and the paddle and the canoe. So first I would take the canoe, and how you carry it through the forest is you lift it up upside down over your head, and you carry it like that. It rests on the back of your shoulders. There's a yoke. So I'd carry that with my small backpack, and I'd go to where the next lake was, and then I'd walk back, and I'd get my big heavy backpack and carry it over with my little tent so everything takes that much longer. And so then you're on the next lake, and if you're staying on that lake that night, that's fine. You find a campsite. Or if you're not, then you're going to the next portage. But let's say you're camping on that next lake. So every lake, because it's in a provincial park, has a designated campsite, and that protects the environment so people aren't going in and just taking down branches and stuff. And all it is a cleared area. It has a fire pit, and in the back in the forest there's a spot, like it's like an outhouse, only there's no walls. It's called a thunderbox that you use for the washroom. So then you have to find one of those. Usually there's a couple. The lakes that I were on, there was like a few on every lake. So I would pick one, and then I'd have to set up camp again. And so, like lunch, or I didn't eat lunch actually. I intended to, but it was just too busy. Like by the time you made your breakfast and did your dishes and made your tea and purified the water and made extra water for during the day and packing up. And so then if you're setting up there, then you get your tent up and everything. And it's just the process in reverse. And it takes the full day, and plus that time of year, September, which is when I've done my trips, it gets dark earlier, so it's not like you have dinner and then you're paddling around in the lake enjoying the scenery. Like, so yeah, and I would go for a swim every day, even though the water's cold in September. It was just something that I did. So all these things, like they're time consuming. Like even after swim, now you're getting changed in a little tent. It's not easy.
And tell me, did you come across anyone else when you were out there?
My first trip, I saw no one until I was coming. I did a loop of 8 lakes. So the first 2 days I saw no one. And then right at the end of the third day, I crossed somebody at a portage. They were going the other way, and I was coming in. So all that time, I saw no one, and I had the lakes to myself. I saw no human being.
That's just, yeah. I mean, I can't think of it. It just doesn't happen ever in life unless you create it. So, yeah, absolutely amazing. And must have been very strange when then you eventually did see someone because you hadn't been communicating it with anyone for days apart from yourself. So I'm sure it was kind of strange. And yet you had this shared experience. So lots to talk about, I'm sure. And tell me, when you were out there, well, perhaps before you went out, what were you most fearful of thinking about being out there?
For sure, it was the overnight part. I was pretty sure that physically I'd be okay. Now, I've never carried a canoe that distance before, so I mean, there was some question, but I was feeling pretty comfortable. It was definitely the overnight. Because to be honest with you, sometimes even camping in a campground where there's people all around you, sometimes in the dark, it can be scary
Yeah.
with all these people around. So just imagine when you're out there by yourself. But I have to share with you, the scariest time was before I even went on the trip, because my imagination came up with all kinds of things that might happen during the night. And that was scarier. When you're actually in it, it was different. You just deal with it because there's nobody else to depend on. It's you. And I surprised myself. I'm not saying I wasn't scared, but I wasn't as afraid as my imagination made me before I even went on the trip.
Well, you'd kind of practiced already, haven't you? You'd visualized almost what the worst feelings would be, so you didn't need to do it again. And I think a lot of us do that in life anyway. When we have got some fears about something in the future, our brains absolutely go wild, don't they? If we're allowing them to go that way. But in some senses, it can visualize the worst, and then it's actually better. The reality is far better, and you kind of think, why did I waste all that time worrying? But in a sense, what you just said makes it out to be sort of a practice, so that it can be helpful.
You're absolutely right. It has its place for sure, because then you might be better prepared. Well, you are better prepared because you've imagined it all.
It all, I know, I can hear from you. And more, I think, was probably the sound of it. All sorts happening, yeah. I'm just taking a quick break to share something I'm really proud of. My book, Move Well for Life, which is now officially out in the world. I wrote this book because so many people, despite feeling like they're doing all the right things, exercising enough, being active, and generally looking after themselves, come to me still feeling stiff, restricted, or worried about what aging might mean for their bodies. This book helps make sense of why that happens, and more importantly, what you can do differently. The book is not a workout plan to blindly follow and hope it will stick. It's a practical, reassuring guide about learning how to move better in your own daily life. We look at how you sit, walk, get up and down, reach, rest and move in the many in-between hours, so the way you move actually supports you for the long term. As Kay Cleave, known as Aging Disgracefully on Instagram, put it, this is the book we all need to read, especially as we age, to help us enjoy moving our amazing bodies. And Rosie Nixon, author, speaker and editor, described it as a life-changing book for anyone looking to live better for longer. The book is accompanied by a handy downloadable template for the everyday movement plan we work through in the book, touching on all 6 principles of the Move Well Wheel framework and helping you apply the changes to create long-term habits using the Everyday Ease method. You can buy Move Well for Life now on Amazon, Waterstones and bookshop.org. You can also request it through your local independent bookshop or your local library. And just to share one more endorsement that made me feel really proud, GP Susan Tahiri, a previous podcast guest on Make Movement Matter, said, "This is definitely a book I'll be recommending to my patients. If you want a kinder, accessible and more sustainable way to move, one that actually fits the life you live, this book is for you." Now, let's get back to the episode. And I'm sure the preparation was like really, really intense. And so you were fairly sure of your capability, and obviously you were capable because you did it. And it sounds like you really enjoyed it as well. So what do you think, both during and after, did anything change in you? I don't mean, the sort of thunderbolt, but, how did it change you, that experience? Because you must have gone into it with hoping slightly that it would make you progress in some way as a human almost.
I did have some expectations, but I thought it would come from just thinking, just sitting and thinking. And I was surprised how little time I had for that in the way that I thought it would. But when I came back, it was like, age doesn't matter. Like, people can say what they want. It does not matter. I just am. I am. It doesn't matter my age. If I am capable, if I have the ability, I can do this. And honest to goodness, it was so empowering. And even now, all these years later, I still feel it when I talk about it. And you can't, nobody can take that feeling away from you. That's the beauty of it all.
So empowering. That is empowering is used a lot, but that's exactly the meaning of it. By doing something that gives you that sense of power in yourself, power in your ability, both your physical ability, but also that mental strength. It was a mental resilience, that toughness that keeps you going. And often, even when your body lets you down a bit, it is still that mental toughness that can keep you carrying on or make you choose. And I think this is very pertinent for the work I do, but also what you love to put out on Instagram as well, about even when things aren't right, you need to be sure that you have got that power within you and that you can be capable, even if it feels quite far off in the future, because like I was in a lot of pain and things felt an awful lot further off for a long time. But to still believe that it's a possibility, and therefore it's worth it. It's worth putting in the effort, because all of these things are an effort. You can't get this by not making an effort, but it doesn't need to always be a massive effort. And it doesn't need to be such an effort that you use it as a barrier not to. I think there are so many ways into this. But it just, you've just proved so much by doing it. And, hence why I wanted you to come on, because not everyone is going to be putting themselves in the wilderness of Canada, obviously. And lots of people do amazing challenges and competitions and so on. But to your, average everyday listener like me, because I don't do those things, it still makes me want to reach higher. And to also set my bar higher, so that I am always prioritizing my movement and my health, so that I can do things at any age, and so that it stays my choice rather than having not put that effort in. All of which I'm sure makes absolute sense to you, because we know we're on the same page with this. So, I mean, I just can't imagine. I think one of the things that struck me the most when we were talking originally, particularly, was the fact that you didn't have a phone. And it's amazing how we are literally, I don't know how long the mobile phone's been around, but obviously my childhood and most of my early 20s, I didn't have a phone. And therefore, and we always got home okay. And our mums didn't know where we were when we were out for the day, and it didn't matter. But for some reason now, it feels so much more significant. Did you feel any pull about the fact you didn't have self-service? Did you struggle with that at all?
No, there's a little bit of a story to that, because sometimes I like to do things like the old way. And so when I planned this trip, and I told my husband, and both of us are amateur radio operators. Okay. So he suggested, well, take a little handheld radio out there with you, and I'll set you up with a tiny little antenna, and we can connect. And I said, well, No, I don't think so. I just want to go out and, be like the explorers and the indigenous people and go out there and just come back 4 days later. And so it was actually the morning I was leaving, and I decided, you know what, I'll take that little radio because, my husband had been so supportive. He wasn't excited about me doing this trip, of
I
course. He
bet.
was concerned, but he was supportive. And I thought, you know what, the least I can do is take this radio. So it's just a little handheld. The antenna, he just hooked up this antenna wire on a collapsible fishing rod. So it collapsed down to this length. And so I had that in my backpack. And once a day at 7 p.m., which even that, I had to check my phone to make sure of the time. And it kind of annoyed me a bit because I didn't want to be connected in that way. But you know what? Once a day, and I actually enjoyed being able to tell them, you know what, I'm okay, everything's good, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so it worked out fine.
I think that's very sensible.
Everybody says that.
Yeah, I know, and it's more for us than that is for you, so that we can collectively know you're okay. I know, but then you're so right. He will have been concerned. Your daughter, we do owe it to our support team. I think sometimes,
We do.
yeah, so I think that's absolutely fair. So you talk a lot about trusting yourself as you age. What do you think that means in real life, in everyday normal life?
What that means to me, when I say that, I mean, don't think about what others expect of you. You know yourself better than anyone. And if it's something you want to do and you ask a friend, do they want to do it? And they go, no, are you kidding? Like, we're beyond that. You know what? Like, just trust yourself. If it's something you want to do, go do it. I just, this is your life, and you don't want any regrets at the end. You want to enjoy every moment. We worked our whole life. We raised kids. We did whatever. This is our time. We have the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I would almost say as well, looking back on my own as well, even almost when you don't have the time, it's almost just as important, because I think we, particularly as mums or caregivers, we do separate ourselves, and our needs do end up getting lower and lower. And we forget that it's important that we do those things for ourselves to maintain how we see ourselves, and that we challenge ourselves, because then we're better at doing that caregiving job, I think, ultimately. And obviously the same goes for, as you said, the basic things of looking after yourself, moving, eating well, getting out and about, everything that we can. And yeah, it is a key message, isn't it? That it's okay to not do what others expect of you. It's okay to be allowed to dream, or say no, or make the choice that feels right in your gut. Because I think when you were planning your trip, you were obviously over a number of years having a bit of a push-pull, because sounds like almost from the get-go you had a thing inside you that said, I could do that, because in that woman you saw yourself, but you almost didn't want to admit it for a while. And then when you did, it became a reality, and you were like, damn, I'm gonna have to do this. And I think that's the same for a lot of people. We harbor these things, which are either dreams, or they're just, or we squash down the things that are important to us because of others, and we don't want to regret that, do we?
No. And it's so easy, because even when I had all these feelings and I wanted to do this thing, I had so many comments, like you wouldn't believe some of the comments I would get from people. And it actually
Tell me some of the comments. I'd love to hear.
I might never see you again. I hope you have a gun. You better do it really fast. Like, in other words, you're too old now, so you better do it now if you're going to do it. Like, just so many things. Or do you realize what this entails? Yeah.
Yeah, done a bit of homework.
I mean, it was easier to take the comments from family because that came from concern. And, when it came right down to it, everybody was supportive. So in my family. So it's you have to be really on your game to be able to push those, what people say, to push that aside and just stay true to yourself. And like I say, trust yourself because
Yeah, so it doesn't erode your self-belief because you've obviously had the self-belief to decide, this is something I think I can do. I'm going to challenge myself with it. But you probably rarely go into something thinking, I'm not sure I can do this, unless it's something like a marathon where you can stop. Whereas with yours, you've got to keep going. You're on a loop. You've got to get there.
Yeah.
So those messages, my gosh, like I can understand that it comes from a place of fear. It comes from a place of them perhaps comparing themselves. There could be a little bit of envy and jealousy, not that they necessarily want to do that, but maybe people felt they weren't capable in themselves to do that. And, they've seen the way you've led your life. So they're probably, it's sort of undercover admiration. So tell me, you've talked before as well. You've made this statement in our chat before, which I loved, which was your message of don't fold your wings and withdraw. Those were your words, and I wrote them down. Tell me what you think keeping your wings open looks like as you age.
Okay, well, that statement, that I say it often, and it's like withdrawing and putting yourself in the corner and just saying, okay, this is me, I'm done. Opening your wings is just being open to what's available to you and really just understanding that, you're not done. You're still here. You're alive. You can do things. And even if you have physical limitations that you had a goal, but now that goal is off the table because you do seriously have some limitations, then that's okay. But often we can be creative and find another way to do that same goal. And I'll use my canoe trip for an example. Say I physically couldn't carry my canoe and backpack to portage from lake to lake. Well, I could still have that solo trip. And how I could do that is the provincial park, the campground is at one part of the lake, but on the same lake, there are some campsites out in the backcountry. So I wouldn't have to portage. I could just paddle to one of those other campsites. I'm still out there with no one around. And so I've reached my goal without having to carry my gear. And so that's what I mean. Or it could be something like you want to, you had a goal of going to Italy and learning how to cook Italian food at some resort, but so you can't afford it or you physically can't do it. Well, maybe you can do something locally with like-minded people and have every 3 months have a dinner hosting with Italian music. You can still get a feel for it if you just kind of be creative and open your mind to what's possible.
It's everything you're saying is that expansive mindset. It's not the contractive one. It's not the victim. It's saying, I want to do something and I can do it. So how do I make it work? Rather than, okay, here's the barrier and I'm just going to get annoyed that the barrier is there and see it as a fixed entity that I can't work around. Whereas you're talking about walking around the side because you can't get over it. And that to me makes so much sense. And in movement terms, I do believe that everyone can progress with their movement regardless of their limitations. There's so many incredible people who are in wheelchairs who have lost their limbs, and the things that they can do with their other limbs and clearly with their determination. And I think there's such incredible examples that when we do come across limitations, it's how we decide to deal with them. It's how we look forward. And, you can be a long time feeling like something is a huge barrier to you. And I am the first to admit that when I was in pain, I was really thinking in a very much a negative downward spiral. But I think I was also lucky enough that I did have a deep determination, which might have come from anger and frustration as well, that said, this is not going to be it. This is not going to be my lot. And I'm going to search and search and search until I get some answers, or at least I find a way out. And I think it's harnessing that, isn't it? And it's using that as much as you can, perhaps even more intensely as you age, so that you can counter those more ageist statements and narratives that are out there.
The thing is, yes, we can progress, because when you think of muscles or joints, whatever, they're not static. If we don't use them, they decline. It makes perfect sense. If we do use them, they improve.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to just bring in a little bit about your Instagram page so that I encourage people to go there. So today, I think it was yesterday, you did a wonderful post about you were teaching a class. And all I would say is, I'm not even going to say who was in the class, but the class attendees were, I don't think, moving as much as they should. Now, we're recording this on, I can't even read my watch. Is it the 15th? Yeah.
It
so
is.
I think this was the post on the 14th. Sheila brings so much joy to the Instagram page, joy about movement, fantastic positive messaging, but also she just makes you giggle. And so you've got to find out who were in her class. That's something I've got to get you to go and see. But also then today, your fantastic one where you were being chased by the movement police. I loved it. And to be honest, I was really envious of those massive dumps of snow that you could crawl through and flop back into. Because, when we get snow, it's like not even an inch. It's really boring. And even in that, I'm doing my snow angels and lying there doing silly things in swimming costumes and stuff just because it's so rare. But your page just, it brings so much joy. And you don't do it for any gain, do you? Because you're not benefiting financially anyway. You do this just as a message that you think is really important.
Well, that's true. I don't have a subscription or anything. I do. I mean, it is my platform. I wrote a book called No Expiry, and that is on my Instagram profile. But I mean, that's a little different. Somebody chooses to go there and decides whether they want to buy the book. And I feel that's different from charging for a subscription, because I feel that would make people maybe, am I missing something if I don't subscribe? I don't want to take people's money. I want to improve their life. I want them to change their mindset. I want them to sparkle.
Yeah. And you do. And you absolutely do. So, I mean, I think it's quite obvious the sort of answer to this, but if someone was thinking about, if you'd inspired them to think about the challenge perhaps that they had been thinking of a few years ago, or they'd shelved it a little bit, or something had happened in the meantime where they had decided to relegate it, but hearing you, they thought, yeah, I'd like to have a go, but I'm now 5 years older or whatever. what would you say to them about that sort of push and pull between doing the challenge and seeing themselves in terms of their age?
Well, there's a few things. For one thing, we see people in their 90s that are very physical. We see people in their 50s who are not very physical. It's not the age. And it comes down to the trusting yourself and just being open to the possibilities, because even if you physically aren't strong enough, you can become strong enough. And just realizing that once you achieve something, of course it's going to be hard, because if it were easy, it would be meaningless. But once you reach your goal, no one can take that away from you. You've done it, and that is just more fuel for the next step.
Yeah. I love that. It's so true. It's so true. And I think that what you said about the comparison between the active 90-year-old and the less active 50-year-old is so true, because and I've talked before on here about people will often tell me their age as though that then means something about their physical capability. But it doesn't at all. It pitches me where they are in their life, but it doesn't tell me anything about how they move, what their outlook is, and so on. And yet there is this thing in society where we will sort of pigeonhole people based on age, which is, as you've just demonstrated, completely wrong. And I've had some wonderful people on here. I always talk about Sir Chris Ball because he's just incredible, who is 90 and started running in his 70s, and then created the Brathay 10 in 10 challenge, where he did 10 back-to-back marathons in 10 days. So, it's all possible. Yeah. It's amazing. People do amazing things. And that wasn't sort of, that was almost couched to 5K, I don't know if they do that where you are, but couched to 5K running in his 70s. So, and he just took it an awful lot further. So if this has resonated with people, what would you say is one meaningful shift that they could make in their own mindset, or in the way that people talk to themselves about aging, that would help them to shift more towards the kind of mindset you're talking about?
Other than what we've already discussed, I would say, don't say I can't. Just think about being able to. Like, when you use a negative word, your body internalizes that. For instance, if you are trying to balance something or pour something in a tiny little container, if you go, don't spill it, you spill it. But if you just say, I am pouring this into the container, then there's no negativity to it. It's not, I don't think I can do that. Maybe I'll try. It's like, I'm going to try. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
And I think you're a perfect example of when, I think particularly those questions before you went on your trip and so on, about notice the narratives around you, because they can be really damaging, because they are, if you internalize them, I think you said that at the beginning, if you internalize them, as you said, they become your reality. And it's interesting because I think we're not aware that genuinely happens, because they're just everywhere. That's the problem, because everything we see on TV, everything that we read, how older people are portrayed in in films and so on, it's everywhere. And yet, obviously, if you find the right corner of the internet or the right corner of Instagram, then you find really inspiring people like you. So
thank you.
I think it's about those external things as well. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you, Sheila. I just need to tell the audience, Sheila is sat in her car so that her signal is good, because it's not great where she lives. She has literally, you'll see from the video if you're watching it, she has like 100 layers on. She's got heating pads in her mittens, because in the middle of a snowstorm. So I have to say a huge thank you for getting right through the weather and giving us your time. You're obviously a resilient lady. Thank you so much, Sheila. Before I wrap up, if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate you taking a moment to rate and review Make Movement Matter on your podcast platform of choice. It genuinely makes a difference in helping the podcast and my message reach more people. And if something in this conversation resonated, I'd love you to get in touch to tell me how. Share a clip or a takeaway over on Instagram and tag me when you do. That's one of the best ways this message continues to travel. If listening today has made you curious about your own movement, not just exercise, but how you move through everyday life, and you'd like support to feel more comfortable, capable, and confident in your body, you can find everything over at reclaimmovement.co.uk. You'll find simple ways to get started, like my mini course, Happier Hips in 5 Steps, my 8-week signature course, Reclaim Everyday Ease, or access to a library of short movement videos and longer classes designed to help you integrate healthy, natural movement into real life, not add another thing to your to-do list. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this community that's helping make movement matter in everyday life for life. Tune in again next week. And if you never want to miss an episode, you can sign up to be notified by email when new episodes are published by visiting the podcast webpage at reclaimmovement.co.uk/Make Movement Matter podcast. And in the meantime, happy moving more naturally.